Hello, everyone. My name is Becca Beyer. I'm an educational consultant here at Blast IU 17 on the TAC team. And today's session is strategies for responding to low level behaviors. So, we're going to talk about some different strategies to help respond to those low level behaviors while maintaining a positive and supportive learning environment to reinforce appropriate behaviors, minimize disruptions, and support student success. So, our agenda for this session, we're going to talk about some different types of power struggles, look at academic engagement, behavioral momentum, gray rock, accepting approximations, and then first then, when then, and controlled choices. So, as we go through this presentation, this quote really kind of sums it all up of if you want it, you have to teach it. So, if we want a student to succeed, whether that's academically, social emotionally, behaviorally, we have to teach them so they have the skills to do it independently and fluently. So, just like we teach a student how to multiply and do long division through direct instruction and explicit instruction, we're going to teach them how to show respect or how to be safe in the hallway or how to behave appropriately in the classroom in the same manner as we teach academics. So, when we start thinking about some behavioral challenges in the classroom, a lot of them stem from power struggles between adults and students, and students, or adults and adults. We're going to talk about 4 different types of power struggles in this section. And the reason we're talking about these is, as the phrase goes, you need to name it to tame it. If we have the vocabulary and the background knowledge about different types of power struggles, we can identify when we're accidentally engaging in those power struggles. So, as the adult and as a person of authority in the room, or people who have a little bit more control in the classroom, we need to recognize when we're accidentally getting into power struggles with students so we can back out of it. So, we're all going to accidentally get into a power struggle with students. Students get into power struggles with other students, and we get into power struggles with other adults. But if we recognize that, we'll be able to back out of it and hopefully lessen the repercussions from engaging in those power struggles. So, we're going to look at 4 different main types today, a little bit of what it looks like, what it sounds like on both ends of student and teacher. And then further in the presentation, we're going to talk about some strategies to diffuse if we do accidentally get into a power struggle with a student. So, the 4 types we're going to talk about today are defending credibility and questioning authority, keeping score, button pushing, and because I said so. So, before I give you any examples here, I just need you to know that if you've ever walked into a classroom where I've been teaching at any point in my career, there's a chance that you've heard me say one of these things. So, I've done all of these things. I've said all of these things. I've worked myself into a corner in all of these areas. So just know that it happens and it happens to all of us. So I'm speaking from that personal experience here. In fact, some of these might be quotes directly from myself. So, starting with the first one, defending credibility. On the teacher side, this might sound like saying things like, I'm the teacher, I'm in charge, I'm the grown up. That's why. When a student tries to argue or fight with you about something. And this is one where I'm going to share a personal story, not my shining moment, where I was working with a student and getting some pushback from them. And I had worked with them for multiple years, from probably the 3rd or 4th grade, and he was into high school at this point. And he was about a foot taller than me at this age, and he was sassing me about something, and I had tried every which way I could to get him to work on whatever reading assignment I had for him, and it just was not happening. And we were both standing while having this discussion, I'll say, instead of argument. And I pulled up one of the chairs next to me and stood on it. So I was finally taller than him again. And I said, because I'm the grown up here, that's why. And even though you're taller than me, doesn't mean you're in charge. And thankfully, I knew the student well enough. We had a good enough relationship that just ended in a lot of giggling on his end, because, you can't really take your teacher seriously when she's standing on a chair and saying, I'm taller now, so you have to listen to me. So this is one that I have witnessed and participated in many times. And for on the student side, it might sound like the student saying, you can't tell me what to do, you're not my mom, or I'm going to ask someone else, they'll tell me yes, and they'll kind of try to pit you against another adult. For keeping score, the grown-ups, now before I go into descriptions here, consequences are fine, and students need to have consequences for things. I'm not saying don't have consequences, but when we're talking about keeping score, it might sound like, well, you've had bad days all week, so maybe you can pull it together today, but I don't think you will. So it's using past failures against the student. It's not saying you pushed a friend at recess and you were retaught and you did it again, so now you've lost X minutes of recess. That's not keeping score, but using those past failures or those past mistakes and holding them against the student. For the student, it might be, well, you were mean to me yesterday, so I'm going to be mean to you today as the adult. Button pushing on the teacher side. Well, I know you don't like math, but too bad. It's math time. That's just too bad. So using something that you know is going to get a reaction out of the student. For students, it might be name calling, personal insults, repeated purposeful behavior after you've corrected them. So you've told them they need to sit down 15 times in a row, and they just keep making eye contact with you while standing up on their chair and giggling. That's some button pushing going on. And then the last one pretty much explains itself, the because I said so. This can also encompass like empty threats or ultimatums, or the you better do this or else. Or students saying, well, if you give me math homework, then I'm going to flip my desk. They're kind of engaging in that, here's the threat of what's happening here. So when we're looking at these power struggles, there's some root causes to why are we as grown-ups or why are students trying to engage in power struggles. And a lot of it boils down to the desire for some type of perceived control. So when we're thinking about our students, they're children. They are members of a household where they're not the ones in charge. They might not get to make many decisions in their lives. So sometimes when they find a place where they think they can make the decision, it's something they latch onto because they want to feel that control. They want to feel in control of their lives, just like we all do. And sometimes it comes out in not a positive manner. For adults, it's my job. It's my job to teach you. I'm the adult, I'm in charge, because it literally is my job and I am the adult. But taking that a little bit too far, and it can kind of cross the boundaries between having healthy control in your classroom, having structure, having routine, versus trying to be like having a little bit of hurtful power of it's my way or the highway style. For students, feelings of helplessness, again, going back to we don't know what's happening at home. We don't know what their home life is like, what control they have there. So a little bit of helplessness of I found this area that I can be in charge of and I'm going to take it and run with it because that feels good to me right now. And sometimes power struggles are just boundary setting, just gone a little bit awry. Of you try to set a boundary with a student and we stick to it a little too hard, and then it kind of becomes a game of tug of war. So we want to try to avoid that tug of war as much as possible because we don't want it to escalate into some more challenging behavior. But if it does, because it inevitably will, because we all are going to engage in that tug of war every now and again, we're going to talk about some strategies to diffuse those challenging behaviors. So we're going to start with behavioral momentum is our first strategy. So this is, I believe, from Dr. Terry Scott, and it's success is our best predictor of success, and failure is our best predictor of failure. So when we want students to be successful, we need to set them up for success because if they succeed, they're more likely to succeed again. But we don't want to set kids up for failure by having them fail because if they fail once, they're more than likely to fail again. So we need to intervene between those two. We're going to fail at things, but how can we teach them how to be successful? So if we are giving a student a request or we're placing a demand on them and they're not being successful with it, one of the things we can do here is high probability requests. So talking about behavioral momentum is once you keep moving, your body wants to keep moving. So think of a roller coaster. You're going up the hill. Once you hit the top, your body has all this momentum, or the what do they call it? The car on the roller coaster has all this momentum and it wants to keep going down the other side. So we're going to try to build momentum with our students' behavior of we're going to get up the hill, up the hill, up the hill, up the hill. So that way, once they get to the top, they're just going to keep on going down the other side. So high probability request is something that a student is likely to do and can do successfully, normally independently. And so we want something that they can do. We've seen them do a million times. It's easy, doesn't take much thought, doesn't take much effort. And we're going to give them a few of those in a row with reinforcement. So we're going to give them 3 to 5 with reinforcement before we ask for our low probability request, the thing we really want them to do, but we know it's probably not going to happen if we just say it off the bat. So let's say we want them to do a 25-page math worksheet, but we don't think that they're going to be doing that the first time we ask them. We're going to start with those low or those higher probability requests that are less effort before we sneak in a little bit that low probability request. And then reinforce, lather, rinse, repeat. So we'll go into a little research before I give you an example here. So high probability requests can be used to support academic, social, and communication outcomes. They're effective for students with a wide range of disabilities, from developmental to autism to emotional behavioral disorders. They're effective when used by teachers and paraeducators to increase compliance and follow through, and they're more effective when combined with positive reinforcement. So there is research showing that high probability requests and behavioral momentum is effective on a wide range of students in a wide variety of areas. So this is what it might look like. So right now, we want to go outside for recess, and our problem behavior is that Emily is not putting on her coat for recess. And what we need her to do is put on her coat. So my low probability request is put on your coat. So before I tell her that, I'm going to work through some other steps first. I'm going to say, Emily, touch your nose. And she's going to touch her nose. Great job touching your nose. Wiggle your fingers. Oh, I love that you wiggled your fingers. Pick up your coat. Wiggle your fingers, pick up your coat. Great job picking up your coat. Now put on your coat. So I'm building up to, I'm getting her hands moving. I know it sounds weird to say the first step in getting your child to put on a coat is to touch their nose, but it's following a pattern here of we know she needs this hand to pick up her coat. So I'm going to get this hand moving just a little bit first before it picks up the coat. So starting touch your nose, wiggle your fingers, now move that hand and pick up your coat. So we're building their momentum so that way once they get to the top, that tipping point, they go down this way versus backsliding the other way. So every time that we give one of those high probability requests and the student complies, we're going to praise. Now another example might be, we'll go back to our math worksheet. So our target behavior is doing the 25 problem math worksheet. And the problem behavior is they're not starting their math. So my low probability request is do your math worksheet. What I'm going to do first is, let's say we're using Emily again. Emily, sit in your seat. That's one. Get out your pencil. Write your name. Do problem number 1. Now do your paper. So I built in 4 for her of sit, pencil, name, only 1 problem, and then my low probability request of do your worksheet. So I'm giving the small steps to get them started before I give them the more difficult task. And after each step, I'm praising and I'm reinforcing. And it might take a lot more than 3 to 5 high probability requests, and that's okay. But we're trying to build them up to that more difficult behavior or that lower probability behavior by giving them little successes along the way, because success is our greatest indicator of success. Failure is our greatest indicator of failure. So another strategy, this is again from Dr. Terry Scott. He calls it his hit and run sequence, but we'll talk about the steps here. So let's say we have students working in a group. So they're working over there and I'm across the room and I notice this group in the back isn't quite doing what I need them to do. So I'm starting with eye contact. I want them to know I see them and I'm coming. So I'm making eye contact as I walk towards them. When I get there, I'm going to find a positive to praise for. before giving a reminder, here's what's next. Then I'm going to leave. I'm going to come back. I'm going to find a positive and praise, and I'm going to repeat that process. So, what that might look like, we're in our group activity. That's our target behaviors that they're completing it. Problem behavior, they're a little chatty and off topic over there. So, I'm approaching with my eye contact. Next step, I like that you all have your pencils out and your papers on your desk. That's my praise. Third step, the next step is to work on problems 1 through 5. I'll come back and check on you in a few minutes to see if you need any help. So I'm telling them, here's a reminder of what comes next, but also I'm going to return here. I'm giving them that promise of there will be follow up, but I'm softening it just to see if you need any help. Then I'm going to follow through. I'm going to leave and I'm going to circle back around to that group. If they haven't gotten quite to 5, great job getting numbers 1 and 2 done. You're almost halfway. If you need help on number 3, let me know. I'll be back to check on you later, and then we're going to repeat. So we're finding that little bit of follow through or compliance each step and giving praise with those reminders of what comes next and the reinforcement plus the reminders that we will be back. So we're always following up. Now, once they get numbers 1 through 5 done, great job. You guys did your entire task. I'm very proud of you. Here's what comes next. So we're following back up, but we're not standing, we're not lecturing, we're not hovering over their shoulders for the whole group. We're giving them that little bit of independence there with the support of adult follow-up after. Now, our next strategy is jokingly called gray rock, but it's also known as remaining neutral. So what's more neutral than a gray rock? Nothing. Gray rock is pretty neutral over there in the corner. Nothing you would ever notice and say, hey, that's out of the ordinary. So when I say gray rock, I'm talking about remaining neutral. So when a student is starting to demonstrate some challenging behavior, our response is what's going to dictate how far that behavior is going to go. So our first step is always to try and remain neutral. So if we're talking about something that's a non-negotiable, our response is a little different versus if it's a choice. So right now, if a student's writing in a pencil or a pen, it doesn't really matter to me. But what the non-negotiable is that this work is going to be completed. So I'm going to be thinking through that in my head. What are the choices that are available here versus what is our non-negotiable? What is the thing that has to happen? When we're interacting with a student at this state, we're using a neutral tone, no fluff. I love elementary school. I love special ed. Those are my favorite places to be. So I definitely do fall a little bit on the fluffy side sometimes. But if a student is showing some challenging behavior and you're trying to redirect, it's not the time for all those extra fillers. So I'm not telling you, don't say please and thank you to a student. Absolutely say please and thank you and show your manners. But it's also okay to tell a student to stop or to say, get down. Having a sentence that's very direct and to the point is okay. It's the communication of that. Now, if we're yelling that across the room, I said get down. Not quite neutral. That's a little escalated. But saying you need to get down is perfectly okay. And it gives their brains less to sort through. So if I'm saying, Johnny, you need to get off the table, that's very clear to him. But if I'm saying, Johnny, buddy, I think that might be really unsafe. Do you think you maybe want to get down off the table and you want to go sit in the chair? I think that might be a better choice, Johnny. What does that sound like to you? His brain is trying to sort through all of those extra words and not getting the point of the directive. And also, in that sentence, I asked Johnny if he wanted to stop, and the answer might be no there. So I'm not going to ask if it's not really a question and I don't want an honest answer. If you've worked with students for more than one day, I think you know not to ask them a question unless you want the honest answer, because they are very honest, sometimes to the point where it hurts your feelings a little bit. So we're going in neutral, not having in that extra fluff. We're not phrasing things as questions if they're not really questions. If it's just a directive, I'm giving a straight directive. I'm going to lower my volume. So research shows that having a lower volume and closer in distance is far more effective when giving corrections than having a louder volume and being farther away. So being close to a student and speaking in a normal tone is far more effective than yelling across the room. Our next step is the precision request sequence, which we'll go into on the next slide, and the wait strategy. So this comes from QES, if you're familiar, but it stands for why am I talking? So if a student is starting to get more and more escalated, it's okay to pause and to not be talking during that time. Now, we're always going to make sure everyone's safe and that everyone is taken care of, but it's okay to sit in silence with a kid. A lot of times, hearing us talk to them and give repeated reminders is kind of ramping up their adrenaline in there. So sitting, waiting, why am I talking? That's okay. And then the last bullet is something that I have to tell myself all day, every day, which came from a friend that was fix your face. So my face is very expressive of every thought I'm thinking, even when, and especially when I don't want it to be. So I have to actively think to myself, fix your face, fix your face, fix your face. I'm not trying to mean mug, have the angry eyebrows on. I'm also not smiling from ear to ear if I'm in a challenging behavior. Just trying to have a very neutral face, not angry, but not super happy either. And just think gray rock. Gray rocks are pretty boring. I want my face to be pretty boring too. So going back to our precision request sequence, if we're asking a student to do something or telling a student to do something that's kind of a non-negotiable, like learning is a non-negotiable, we're here at school to learn, that's our purpose, we might phrase it like this. So I'm starting with, Johnny, please sit down and do your math worksheet. And then I'm giving him 3 to 5 seconds to, number one, process what I said, and number two, decide, am I going to do what I was told to do? Because the student does get to make that choice. That's their choice to make. So I'm starting with, Johnny, please sit down, do your math worksheet. That felt like an awkward amount of time, and I can guarantee you it felt more awkward for me on this end than it did for you listening. But 3 to 5 seconds is longer than you expect. The reason we want to practice that 3 to 5 second wait time is to give their brain time to process and decide. If we interrupt that wait time and that processing time, their timer is going to start over again. So we really want to be conscious about the amount of wait time we're giving a student. I will tap on my thigh when I feel the need to keep myself honest to that 3 to 5 seconds, because I'm a fast talker, I'm a fast mover. I want things clipping along at a nice speed. So I have to actively slow myself down in these moments and just work through, okay, they need time to think and they need time to process. Now I said, Johnny, please sit down and do your math worksheet. I gave him his 3 to 5 seconds. If he sits down and starts his math worksheet, great job sitting down the first time I asked you, Johnny. That was so respectful. You look ready to learn to me. Here's a sticker on your sticker chart. Now, if Johnny does not sit down and start his math worksheet, I'm going to rephrase my request a little bit. And I'm going to say, Johnny, you need to sit down and start your math worksheet. Or this is a direction, sit down and start your math. I'm going to change my phrasing a little bit, but I'm repeating that 3 to 5 seconds. If he complies, thank you so much. That was a great choice. Get started. Thank you for getting started. I'm reinforcing. Now, if you'll notice, that second time, I didn't immediately give him a sticker on his chart, because I want his brain to realize that the faster I do the things I'm asked to do, the more exciting this reinforcer is. So if he does it the first time, my reinforcer is going to be more appealing than if I have to ask 7 or 8 times. Now, if we go through that again and he chooses not to follow through on that direction, we follow through with whatever our consequences are in the classroom, whatever is appropriate for the age, those low-level consequences, but the direction doesn't disappear. We come back to it. You need to sit down and do your math. You can remind them of these are the consequences of not doing your work when you're supposed to, but we're coming back to that direction. So this is why I say this works best for those non-negotiables, or those things that have to happen, versus things that are a choice, because we don't want to be getting into this cycle if it's not necessary. But anytime that they are compliant with, or they're cooperating with our requests, we're praising, we're reinforcing, and we're might get into accepting approximations, which is going to be covered in the next section. So when we are addressing students and looking at specific error correction, just like we would correct a math worksheet or a math problem and say, here's exactly what the error was, and here's how you fix it. Show me how you can fix it. We're going to do that with behaviors. So we're respectfully addressing our student. Hey, Johnny, we're describing the inappropriate behavior. Right now, you're walking around the room. What I asked you to do was sit down and start your math worksheet. I'm describing the expected behavior. And then I'm going to link to my expectation. So if we have PBIS going, I'm going to say, show me how you can be responsible, get to your own space, and get started on your work, and start your math worksheet. And then I want to end with Johnny showing me the appropriate behavior. So we want to end on that positive note of, this is the thing that you're expected to do. Show me you can do it successfully while I reinforce. We want his brain to end on that positive, on the expectation. So now into accepting approximations. Really what that means is, if we're trying to get a child to do something and they're not necessarily doing the full task, but they're getting close, they're taking a little step, they're trying to get near what we asked them to do, we're going to praise them for it. So Johnny, I told him to sit down and get started on his math worksheet, but right now he's just pacing the room. So if Johnny goes over and stands next to his desk, I'm going to say, great job getting in your own space, Johnny. The next step is to sit down, or the next step is to sit down and start your math worksheet. But I'm praising him for getting near his desk versus pacing the outside of the room. If he is standing and picks up his pencil at his desk and writes his name, great job getting started, Johnny. Next step is to sit down. If he is standing and doing his math, or if he is sitting on the floor under his desk and doing his math, he's doing something, he's doing a part of what I asked him to do. So I'm going to praise, and I might redirect him to the rest of the behavior. But this is also where I have to ask myself, is this a problem? Is this an acceptable choice? So is sitting under his desk doing his math worksheet an acceptable alternative to sitting at his desk and doing his math worksheet? In my brain, as an elementary educator and a special educator, the math is the important task here. The sitting at the desk isn't necessarily the important part. But if your focus is on teaching a student how to occupy their desk appropriately, that might be the part I focus on. But in my mind, teaching Johnny math is the focus here. So I might take him under his desk doing his math, as long as he's being safe and not interrupting the learning environment. So that's what I talk about at the bottom. That's what I mean when I say reframe your request. If he doesn't need to do both of those things simultaneously, I'm going to take the math. That's going to be a win for me, and I'm going to praise him for that. So just as a reminder, that reframing of your request, it's not giving in or letting students win. It's setting up a scenario where you know they're likely to succeed. So if he is more likely to accomplish his math and to do it well when he's sitting under his desk, it's not, I don't want to be feeling, I gave in, or I'm letting him win, or he's in control here. I don't want to engage in those power struggles. I'm just excited that he is succeeding on the task that I'm giving him. Now, our last few strategies that we're going to talk about for addressing some of those low-level challenging behaviors are first then, when then, and controlled choices. So first then, an important thing, it's not just for students with autism. That's typically where we hear about first then, but it can be applicable for all students. We want to remain neutral and firm when we're presenting things like this, and it's for non-negotiables. A first then is great for non-negotiables. For our younger students or students who are less verbal, we're going to be very simple with it. But for older students or students who are more verbal, we can provide more of an explanation. So first then is first math, then play. That's a simple one for our younger students or students who are less verbal. First math, then play. And I'm holding my hands up, envisioning that I have a paper or a board with visuals of those two tasks. So first math, here's a picture of our math problem, then play, here's our desired toy. And I'm referencing that with the student and showing them this is how we can get to our toys. First math, then we get our toys. Now, a reframing of that I really like is called when then. And it just kind of gives the implication that the first request will be completed. So this is really good for when the second thing is really motivating for a student. So when you finish your math, then you get your iPad. So this has to be done first in order to get this. When you do this, I'm saying, I know you can do this and I know you will do this. When you do this, then you get that. Because this is really reinforcing to you. So I know that math is going to get done. And there's a little bit less room for interpretation. So it's just a one word change, but it does kind of give a little bit more ownership to the student of saying, hey, I have confidence and I know this first one's going to get done. Because when you do it, it's going to be great and we're going to be able to move on. And then our last strategy for addressing those low level behaviors, maybe when we're entering into a power struggle with students, is controlled choices. So we're giving the student an opportunity to express their voice and have some choice in instruction and in their learning environment. And it's really simple, this or that. Do you want to start with math or English? Do you want to write in a pencil or a crayon? Do you want to sit in a seat or on the floor? So all of the options that I'm giving students when I'm giving them controlled choices are acceptable to me. So this thing takes some pre-planning as an adult in the room of knowing what are things that are allowable options. I'm not going to tell a student, do you want to work in our classroom or in the classroom down the hall? If I haven't had that discussion with another teacher, if we haven't planned that ahead of time. Because if they choose this classroom down the hall and then that's not available, that can lead to some further escalation. So I'm providing options that I know I can give to this student and that I know are acceptable choices. We can talk about choices across activity or within the activity. So that means we can say English first or math first. That's across the activity. Those are different subjects. Or within the activity, do you want to start with your math flashcards or your math worksheet? Which one do you want to start with? Those are within, they're the same subject. We can change the order of completion. Do you want to go from the bottom of the paper to the top or the top to the bottom? Do you want to do evens or odds? There's a million different ways that you can provide choices in a student's instructional environment. They can make a lot of choices that don't change the content they're giving or the meaningful learning that they're about to receive. In fact, it really makes it more meaningful for them because they feel some sense of control over their learning environment. So we've reached the end of our strategies for responding to low-level challenging behavior. If you have any questions or thoughts or concerns about any of the content of this presentation and you would like to reach out, my contact information is on the page, and I appreciate you all for your attention.